All right, boys and girls, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Sense Hour podcast. We are joined with Derek from the Sense Shot contributor. It's like the fifth episode in a row that he has been on, and honestly, it's been great. The last couple of episodes have been full of wonderful discussions and um, topics. This one's a little bit more quiet because there hasn't been as big of a news as the previous ones, but you know they're still planning a January 1st season, so that's something to look forward to. Because if that happens, we'll have hockey sooner rather than later.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Shane. Great to join you again. It's been, like I said last time, it's been a slice. It's been a lot of fun, and I look forward to even more in the future.
Yeah, I mean that's the plan, to have you on as much as possible. Um, just before we dive right into it, as you guys all know, we are running a jersey contest through the Hockey Podcast Network. It's the pin tweet on send_hour. Retweet it, follow us, follow the Hockey Podcast Network. The podcast with the most retweets will be able to select one lucky winner to win a brand new jersey. And you can select either the home or the away jersey, so you're not just stuck with the black one if you did want the white one. So head on over to our Twitter page and retweet that. Great way to get a new jersey before the season starts.
Yeah, and speaking of jerseys, if you're an NHL fan on PS4 or Xbox, EA Sports is finally implementing the Sens jersey into the game. Finally.
About time. It's been what?
Yeah.
4 months. It's been like what, a month for something like that since the game has been released.
Yeah, I don't know why it wasn't in there on release, but it wasn't for whatever reason. So they've now changed. I guess they're changing like the center ice logo at CTC, and they're changing the jerseys. So we're finally going to have the nice rebrand, and you could start your franchise mode if you're like me and you're like particular about details. I kind of waited, so it's finally going to be there.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but horror stories of NHL 21 so far this year. I've heard the AI isn't as good as they made it out to be. Be a pro coaching hasn't. I've heard stories of people scoring like 6 goals in a game and then being demoted to the third line, and I've heard horror stories of it.
Yeah, I heard one story of a guy who was doing be a pro as a goalie, and his feedback was all like, "You didn't score enough goals, you didn't get enough assists," and it's just like that's how amateur that game has become. It needs a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a YouTube series from the Nasher, and I watched a little bit of it. I wasn't able to watch the full video, but it sounds like in his first year he had a career-ending injury, and it's like that would suck. Like if that was, I remember playing even like NHL 20. I was like 15, 16 games into the year, and I got hurt, and I was out until like March, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, yeah, you get to go by the season quicker, but like that's a lot of time missed.
Unless you like pick the power forward or grinder or enforcer options, you pretty well get injured your rookie season every time. It's like a guarantee.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know how often you played and ended up being drafted first overall, but I did everything in my power not to be drafted first overall, and I would still get drafted for, like, I would sim the entire like Memorial Cup, and I would still get drafted first overall. It was the most frustrating thing ever.
Yeah, you can't avoid it.
Like, you have one good game, you sim the rest. You don't even need to make the Memorial Cup. Like, there was one time where I had 1 goal and 1 assist in the entire playoffs, or round robin, or whatever you want to call it, and I still got drafted first overall, and I'm like, the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, you can't go to Ottawa no matter how you pick.
Yeah, like I remember in previous years it was extremely hard to get first overall, and I loved it because of it. Like, you actually had to play every single game. You had to average like 2 or 3 points a game to even be considered a top, like a first overall pick.
Yeah, back then there was no option to just basically skip to the Memorial Cup or whatever the option is now. where you play like a handful of games and then you get drafted, before you actually had to play the OHL season or CHL season first, and then you got drafted.
Yeah, I don't know. I miss the old EA. I really want 2K to come back with a game because 2K was awesome.
Yeah, and that's what drives the market a little bit. When there's competition, then you see EA kind of get better. I mean, that's when they came out with the skill stick. They implemented that into the game because they were being pushed. They were being pushed from 2K, and now there's no one to push them, and the game has fallen flat for I don't know how many years. It's been like the same product with like small tweaks year after year after year.
100%. Like I remember in my first 2K game, like real 2K game that I invested time in was 2K9, Jason Spezza on the cover. And you were able to get kicked out of a face-off. Like you were able to be tossed from a draw. And I'm like, why hasn't that been implemented into like how has an EA implemented that? Like that's something that should have been implemented in like 2012.
Details like it's 2021. Like the new game is 2021, and you still can't do that. And they have no coaches in the game still. Like it's just generic face coach, and not to mention like the generic faces that are on most of the players too. Like there's only a small number of players that are recognizable, and the rest of them are just like completely generic face players wearing the jersey number.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I think this is the thing. UFC has done a really good job at coming out like every 2 years with a really solid game. And I think it's time that sports games go to that model where it's every 2 years instead of every year, and you would probably see improvements.
Absolutely. I mean, you can update the rosters. I mean, they could just keep the roster updates coming for 2 years as opposed to just updating the roster for 1 year and then coming out with a new game, which isn't even a new game. It's basically just a roster update with a few really minor, unnoticeable tweaks, and some of them make the game worse. Like this year's NHL 21 version is so bad that they have to basically like their update. I was reading through their update that they're doing, and they're going through like the whole mechanics of the game. Like it's just a flawed game. You could beat people. You could beat the AI to the outside every single time on Superstar. Like I'm talking, you set the difficulty to Superstar and Ultra Sim mode, like the hardest possible, and you could still easily wheel around the D with like Austin Watson.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I've heard, yeah, I mean, that's like one of the few things I've heard. I've heard the poke check is still horrible. Like it's still god awful. Like there's so many things wrong with this game that I was just like, I've been tempting to buy it like around Christmas and whatnot because it'll go on sale. But like, I'm not going to waste the money on it if it's as bad. I'll wait and see what happens next year and with the new consoles. But I don't know. I feel like this is a worse version of 2014.
Yeah, it's not very good. It hasn't improved a whole lot since then. I did say I would stop complaining about it though on Twitter because finally they listened and they are changing the jerseys and they're giving us the jerseys that I was asking for since release day. So
I mean, they should have waited and had them ready for release day.
That's the thing. They put these games out there like half made, and then they've got to make all these changes after. And it's like, don't they play the product first before they put it on the market?
Probably not. I don't trust it.
No.
I don't trust anything that EA says, to be honest.
No, it's always half-assed. It's just put out there.
Like EA could come out and say, "Oh, we're gonna wait until 2022 to release a game. We're not gonna release the game next season. We'll come out with 2022 for the 22-23 season," and I wouldn't believe it until it actually happened.
Yeah, it's all about making money, and they're the only ones in the NHL market, so they could pretty much do whatever the heck they want, and they have people promoting their game that will tell you that it's the most amazing thing in the world, and they actually get good ratings from their games. Like I actually, this year is the only year I looked at reviews just because of how bad the game played, and the reviews were positive. I was blown away. Even the Be a Pro that they updated, it's like so repetitive that you're sick of it after playing it for a few hours. You're like, okay, like this was fun at first, and now it's just very repetitive.
It's not like they don't have something like 2K My Park to look at in terms of how to do a proper Be a Pro.
Yeah, that's a prime example. Like even their own like EA versions of their own EA games. I know the NBA EA game. I don't even know what it's called. I played
NBA
it.
Live.
Yeah, I know it suffers. Like it's pretty bad, but at least they had like the face scan thing where you can put your own face into the game instead of picking again like a generic face, which is just a cool element. But
Yeah, I mean they also had other things going for them and whatnot, but it's just a matter of like they have the results and like the abilities to do it. They just need to put the time and effort into it and like the actual want to make it better.
yeah, and I think just NHL being as small as it is, ultimately that's what suffers because they probably don't have the same budget in terms of hiring people that produce these games as some of the other bigger markets. Although Madden, like I've heard Madden sucks as well. So I
Madden's
don't.
also trash.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Uh, like, but the thing is, though, is that it takes money to make money, and if you're willing to put money into the product, you're going to get money out because you're going to have more people. Like if you were to have like a my rink, like a my park version in the NHL, call it my rink, whatever, where you're able to practice, you're able to go out and go shopping for skates and sticks and whatnot. You're gonna have fans who aren't necessarily video game fans who want to buy that game because they want to experience that. You guys get like if they get McDavid or Crosby involved as like a mentor or something like that, and you start off in the CHL, and you kind of go through the playoffs as like a top prospect kind of thing, and you have these different challenges, these different situations. I think you would have a lot more people buying it. It's just a matter of putting that time and energy into it for the consumers to be like, oh yeah, I'll buy this again.
Yeah, because it's something different. Like it's not the same game every year. But I mean, like you said, they just need to focus on like that stuff's already been created. They just need to go out and do it. And 2K already does a great job of doing that. And the NHL, EA, they just suffer when it comes to making anything new.
Yeah, and it's been frustrating because like I've been playing this game since 2002, 2003 is when I can really remember playing it. 2004, like NHL 04 with Danny Heatley on the cover. That's the one that like I really remember. That was the first one that I can like remember clear as day playing. But it's gotten so bad so quickly, and it's disappointing.
Yeah, it is because it's all we have. Like it's the one hockey game that we have as a hockey fan. So if you play video games at all, that's your one and only choice as a hockey fan. So you take it or leave it, and a lot of people are leaving it.
Yeah, and I think you're gonna see I think it's gonna be make or break next season for EA in terms of NHL.
Next season's huge. I mean, because it's next gen. So if they really want to revamp the game, they need to start from the ground up and like give us a whole new product and not just the same trash with better graphics.
If they don't make it better with the next gen, they're done.
Yeah, they're in deep trouble.
Like I don't think there's no way you can save it if you don't have the next gen at like a level that is so beyond what you have now. Like I personally, I'm not even considering buying the next gen console, even though there are games that I want to play right now. I just don't have the time, and I'm not going to waste the money on like a $700 console. But if you have guys who all they play is Chell or all they play is Madden, if you put out a really good product, they'll most likely go out and spend the money on a console for one game.
Yeah, I like hockey game is the only game that I play. Personally, I'm not really a video game guy, but I do play like I said, I like the sim mode kind of. I want it to represent what a real hockey game would look like. So that is the only game I play, and I would probably buy a next gen if there was a decent hockey game for it. So we'll see.
I mean, there's Hockey Manager on like Steam, which is pretty cool because you can go back to like 90, I think 1990, the 1990-91 season with the rosters from that team. So like I've seen things of like Ottawa going back to like 07 and redoing the 07 season and things like that, which is really cool. And it's a full sim kind of league where you're not playing any of the games. You're kind of just managing the team. So that to me would be something. If that were to go to console, it'd be ridiculous. I think people would eat that up if that's something that went to console.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely something different. And that's what we need. Not the same crap every year.
100%. But their big news, Yaro signed and Bruce, that kind of came out of the blue. No one really mentioned it. It was Cap Friendly who broke it. Bruce Garriock put out a tweet today saying that, with Christian Yaro signing, it's most likely going to be this is the roster. This is who the team has. They're comfortable with who they have. We shouldn't expect anything more. How serious do you think that is? Like, do you really think that this is going to be the final, like this is our roster, this is what we're going to camp with? Or do you still think that there might be a move or two for Pierre Dorion and co to make between now and training camp?
I don't think he's shutting his phone down by any means, but I think he's made a lot of roster moves. I think it's been a very busy offseason. It's a dramatic change from the team that they dressed last year. I think it's substantially improved offensively. I think defensively is going to be potentially a little bit of a roller coaster, especially on that right side. But we do have a healthy Christian Wolanin, and if he does take that step forward, that I think we all think he can, it's going to be, in my opinion, a much improved team. And then you've got Matt Murray and Hogberg as a tandem in goal. So honestly, I think Dorion's made probably the most moves out of almost anybody. So I'm not surprised that Garriock tweeted out that, this is probably the final product. And I like the product. I think looking at it on paper, I think the Senators have a chance to take that first step forward. It may not be a leap. Like we're not talking about a playoff team in my mind, but we're talking about a team that could potentially take a step forward. What do you think?
I mean, part of me is like, oh, I don't want to say no to the situation but I also don't want to quote like, I believe Garriock when he says it, but at the same time, part of me is kind of more skeptical of like, I don't think Dorion is actively looking to improve, like add to the team, but I definitely think that if there's a deal that comes across, but it also makes me wonder, does that mean Timmy Stützle isn't coming over?
Oh yeah, I mean that's another good point because if this is the roster, then maybe that the deal doesn't get done. But I think I don't know. I think that's like more of a sidebar thing. Like if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't happen, they have enough players anyway. So it's kind of one of those things that if it works out and the deal happens, I'm sure we'll see them come to training camp. And if it doesn't happen, they're probably content with who they have anyway.
Agreed. It's just like hearing that. It's like, oh, I mean, that must mean they're not confident with Timmy Stützle coming over this season, and it would explain the Galchenyuk signing. But I don't know. I don't think Dorian is one of those guys who's going to be actively looking to add to the team. But if a deal were to come across, he's not one to just kind of straight up say no. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if this is exactly the roster that we're going into camp with. And then Timmy Stützle is going to be that question mark of, does he come or does he go? Or does he come or does he stay in Germany for the year? I guess it also really depends on that injury and when the season starts. Well, it looks like we're experiencing technical difficulties again. Gotta love it. It's unfortunate. Derek, are you there? All right, we were experiencing some technical difficulties. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we will continue to the discussion of the roster makeup and what it means for Timmy Stützle and much more. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Looks like we have the technical difficulties out of the way. But before the technical difficulties, we were talking about we feel confident in the camp roster with or without Timmy Stützle being part of it.
Yeah, I think Stützle certainly has the potential to be an NHL player this year, as Dorian and Mann and company have already mentioned. But if he's not an NHLer this year, Ottawa went out and got Galchenyuk. They went out and made a few moves. They've got Dadonov. They've added a lot of players to the roster. And there really isn't a whole lot of spots. I think we talked about it last week. There's probably 2 roster spots left for contention on the roster. So could Timmy Stützle take one of those spots? Absolutely. But could Ottawa kind of move forward without Stützle in the picture and with him in Germany? They absolutely could do that as well.
Yeah, and I mean, I really hope he goes to the World Juniors. I know he'll be coming off the wrist injury, but I think it'll be important for him. It'll be the first time he's been on the ice since when I think March or April when the German league shut down. So I think it's important to get him back on the ice as quickly as possible. That being said, I'm pretty sure he's actually on the ice because it was only an upper body injury and it was a wrist injury. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's skating with the team, just not, doing any kind of stick drills and whatnot. But the one thing I have to ask you though is how, and it comes with the Sens, and it comes with the fact that if it's a 48 game season, if it's a season just like the shortened lockout season of 2013, do you think that Ottawa can have a very strong 48 game season where you're probably only going to need to win about 20 to 25 games to make the playoffs? If they do you take it with a grain of salt?
That's a good question. Yeah, in a shortened season, it's more of a sprint than a marathon, and anything can really happen. In 48 games, could the Senators win enough to get into a playoff spot? I think that would be really interesting, and I think a lot of things would have to go right for them really quickly. But when you're talking about a small season like that and a small sample size, I think it would also be important, as you said, to take it with a bit of a grain of salt. I think I would still take it as a huge step forward if they were anywhere near a playoff spot, even in a 48 game season, I would still say like, wow, I would be shocked. And I would be very optimistic, but at the same time, you would probably want to be a little more cautious about how optimistic you were, just because it's such a weird season. And I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you think if it's a 48 game season and Ottawa somehow at the end of that season winds up like in a playoff spot in eighth, are you taking that as, this is the step forward we were kind of expecting maybe next year? Or do you think it's more a product of the 48 game season?
If it's eighth, I'm going to say it's a step forward, product of the 48 game season. If it's if it's a division spot, 3-1, I think it's more of this is the step forward that we wanted to see, aided by a 48 game season. If they're leading the division, you can give the credit to the 48 game season, the fact that they've been off for almost a year. Do whatever you want to put an asterisk on it, especially if you're not a fan of the Sens. But I think it would show that the team that we had made a difference, that this team made a difference, and that they're building the right thing. I don't care what happens in this season, if it's a shortened season, if it is a 48 game season, because the real tell of this team will be the 21-22 season. Whatever happens in the 21-22 season is really what's going to be the tell. But I think if you can get them having some sort of playoff experience during the whatever season we have this year, it's important for the growth of the team.
Yeah, I mean, my expectation for playoff experience is that the Belleville Senators are going to be a damn good team, and they're going to have a lot of playoff experience. But I would be very shocked if Ottawa made the playoffs, although they have talked about bringing back like the 20-team playoff thing. So if you're talking about a 20-team playoff, then it does become more possible that Ottawa makes the playoffs. And then that could really mess with your expectations for the following season. If, say, Ottawa, makes the playoffs by being 19th, but then wins in that like first play-in round, kind of like Montreal did. And then it kind of throws your expectations off for the following season. And hopefully doesn't do like what the Matt Duchene kind of situation did for the Senators, where they fool themselves into thinking, oh, we need to spend money right now because this team is ready much quicker than we anticipated. And now we're going to throw a bunch of money at this team a little too early before they really peak. And then you get, but I really can't see that Pierre Dorion making that mistake twice. What do you think?
I don't think it was necessarily a mistake. I think if Turris, like, here's the thing. I don't think Turris was a number one center. He played, and I mean, we overplayed that year. I think it's really, you can look back on it and we overplayed. You got lucky against Boston, as much as people don't want to admit it. We did. They had a banged up defense. We made good work of them. We played hard, but I think that situation is different because we don't have a guy like Turris, who has been our number one center for the last couple of years, wanting top center money, even though he's not actually a true top center. You don't have a guy like Duchene, who's supposed to make any team better, and your biggest need was a number one center. If you look at on that roster, if we could have kept Turris in that deal, we would have had Duchene, Turris, Brassard, and Pajot as our 1 through 4. That's amazing. Even having Duchene, Brassard, Smith, and Pajot as your 1 through 4 is really good. I think there was I think that trade, though, for Duchene, it hurt the locker room because you had half the team being like, I think you had half the team basically being like, Duchene's an improvement over Turris.
Yeah.
And then you had half the team being like, yeah, but we just went to the Eastern Conference Finals. We made it to Game 7, second overtime, lost by 1 goal. What are you doing?
Yeah, not only that, like Turris was clutch, right? Like he was their guy in every overtime I can think of. He was the one putting the puck in the net. And seemed by every account that Turris was a guy that the locker room loved.
Yeah, and I mean, then you have Bobby Ryan's comments after his first game back in Ottawa, and there, I think if you look at how the locker room was kind of divided, I think Bobby Ryan, Erik Karlsson, I think Dion Phaneuf and Derek Brassard, those kind of guys were kind of on the side of Duchesne makes us a better team. And then you had guys like Stone and Hoffman, Dzingel, who are like, we just went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Why are we trading away this guy? And I think that's really where a lot of the problems started. Looking back on it, obviously, I mean, if we won our first 2 games with Duchesne, no one saw the landslide of what happening. Like no one saw it. And, it's unfortunate that one trade can set a team back that much, but I think Dorion has done really well with the situation he was put in.
Yeah, it was a tough trade for sure. I mean, financially at the time, we could have had Turris and Duchesne. I don't know how they would have went about adding a guy like Duchesne without getting rid of Kyle Turris. I'm sure they could have worked something out. And it might have meant more futures. Things have really kind of shifted and worked out in Ottawa's favor. Like when you look back at some of these big trades, you're looking back and you're like, okay, like Erik Karlsson, he was our franchise player, but looking back at it now, it's like, man, he is not the same player. And all the pieces we got back for him are unbelievable. And, moving on from Kyle Turris seems like the right decision because he's just never been the Kyle Turris that we knew and loved. And even Mike Hoffman, to an extent, I mean, we're seeing his struggles in the offseason in finding a hockey team. And even though the regular season production is there for Hoffman, he comes with his flaws. Like he's not a perfect defensive player. I'll use the term soft, but a bit of a perimeter player. I love Mike Hoffman. I love his ability to shoot the puck. But when you look back at some of these moves that Ottawa made to start the rebuild, when you look back at it now, it's easier to swallow because a lot of them turned out in our favor. I think aside from Mark Stone, which we don't know how it's going to turn out because Brandstrom still could be every bit as good as we thought he would be.
He's 21, so we need to be a little bit more patient with him. But here's the thing. I don't think that we're any better if we don't trade Mark Stone. Let's say we sign Mark Stone to an 8-year deal. I don't think right now we're any better with him than we are without. And in fairness to Mark Stone, like, why would you want to waste, I don't know, you're 27, you're entering your 27-year-old season. There's a chance that we're not competitive until you're almost 30. Why would you want to waste that kind of your prime years on a team that's in the middle of a rebuild?
Yeah, that was his reasoning, and I think he was entitled to make that decision. And I think Pierre Dorion did the best he could in that situation. I mean, Mark Stone was on an expiring contract. He did re-sign in Vegas, which I think upped the price a little bit, and that's what allowed us to get a player like Brandstrom, who, when he came over, was an A+ prospect and one of the very best prospects in the entire NHL. And I think he's still regarded by a lot of people as that guy, but certainly seeing him play a little bit, some people have changed their opinions, I think, too early on Erik Brandstrom. We have to let it play out, and we could be looking at another kind of Erik Karlsson sort of trade situation in a couple of years' time if Mark Stone is not able to keep pace with the league. He's always struggled to skate. He's great right now, and I'm not going to take anything away from Mark Stone. He's a dominant player. But, could it be another kind of Erik Karlsson situation when we're actually competitive?
100%. And I mean, the thing with Mark Stone is, I don't know how true, there was a report earlier in the offseason that Mark Stone was only willing to sign an extension in Vegas. That's where he wanted to go. He wanted to go to Vegas. And apparently Ottawa teams pulled out better offers for Mark Stone because of it. They wanted a lot of these deals, according to this report, was that, we'll make this trade, but only if we can sign Mark Stone. And he wouldn't do it. And you know what? That's fair to him. It's kind of frustrating as a fan of like, okay, you want to be traded, but teams want you. And I think that's kind of like, we probably could have gotten a better offer. Maybe there was a team that was offering us a first round pick plus a high end prospect, but they wanted Stone to sign. And, he didn't want to sign. And it kind of took the offer on the table. And we had to take the only offer on the table that he was willing to agree to. And then it's just, that's, I think, the unfortunate part of waiting until the deadline to trade Stone. I think we would have been better off doing the same thing we did with Stone with Karlsson, trading him before training camp. I think we could have done a lot better if we just said, screw it. Duchesne, Stone, and Karlsson would be traded before training camp. I think we would be in a lot, not necessarily a better place, but with a better future.
Yeah, potentially. And I think, once again, I think it's too early to take anything away from Erik Brannstrom. And, that's a day that Pierre Dorion described as like his best day as a GM or whatever, his proudest moment as a GM, I think was his words, which is kind of bold. But going back, it just goes to show how big of a prospect Erik Brannstrom is and how we can't forget Erik Brannstrom. And he could be that guy. Like some people still have him ahead of Jake Sanderson on the prospect pool ranking as, the very next guy to Tim Stützle.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we're going to see he's going to make a big jump this year. He's played really well overseas so far. So I think that's something to kind of pay attention to, is that can he carry that momentum over back into North America and kind of build off of it?
Yeah, and like you said about the Stone trade, I think Pierre Dorion was kind of backed into a corner and had to do the best he could with that situation. Given the time of it at the deadline, he had to make the move. If he doesn't make the move, you lose Mark Stone for nothing. So he had to make the move. I think Ottawa kept Mark Stone for as long as they did because they were hoping that Mark Stone would kind of change his mind and adapt to wanting to be the captain of the team. I think they probably offered him an extension, and they probably offered him to be the captain. And he, like you said, he just wasn't interested in going through a rebuild. And hopefully we have the last laugh. Hopefully in a few years' time, we're playing Vegas in the Stanley Cup final and we get to beat Mark Stone and the Vegas Golden Knights. That would be awesome. Although I have nothing against, I have no animosity towards Mark Stone and the decision he made. It would still just be kind of fun.
Yeah, and I mean, I look at Mark Stone as Mark Stone, Mike Hoffman. I look at a lot of these guys as part of the initial problem, because if you go back to like the 2012-13 season, 13-14 season, we weren't supposed to be good. We started offloading players, and then you had the emergence of Erik Karlsson, which is manageable, but then you had the emergence of Mark Stone and Mike Hoffman, Pajot. You get into the playoffs in 2014, you beat Montreal in the first round, and you get this false sense of, okay, the team's starting to get competitive. We need to do things to ramp it up. And I think now Pierre Dorion was like, okay, we're going to go through the rebuild that we should have done then, and we're not going to make these brass decisions on a couple of years of mediocre success.
Yeah, you can't cheat the process. And I think that's the lesson that he learned through that time. Exactly what you said. I mean, you have a team that was chronically a bubble playoff team, if we're being honest, as much as we love Karlsson, as much as we love Stone and Hoffman and these guys, with that core, the best they could do was being a bubble team that sometimes had playoff success and sometimes, were among the best teams in the league, but for the most part, we're in that 9-10 range with a chance to kind of squeeze into the playoffs. And what they're hoping to do this time is to build organically and to build a team, like you said, from the ground up, and to go about things the right way. You have to be patient.
here's the thing, that the 14-15 Hammond run, prime example of overachieving on a mediocre team. And then you have, I think it was actually 16-17 where you had Mike Condon come in the like December from Pittsburgh and kind of save the season, and then we go on that magical run. It's like, you know, if you take out that Mike Condon, that they're the Hamburglar run, we're probably picking top 5 in the 2015, like the 2015 draft.
Yeah, it's a huge difference. It's just something that it's just so deceiving because you have those, like you said, the Hamburglar run, which was a lot of fun, and the Condon thing that got them in there, and you know, helped them get successful. And I think Guy Boucher too, in the first year that he implemented the system, I think everyone kind of bought into it, and it worked out. We were, you know, notable boring team, Ottawa Senators, with the, you know, playing the trap system, and a lot of teams play the same system, but they, you know, if the media likes to hate on the Senators, so they called them, you know, the boring trap team or whatever. And the pesky Sens philosophy emerged from there as well. But none of these teams were really good enough. Like, if we were honest about, even, you know, at the time watching them, as much as you want to kid yourself and think, yeah, this is the year we're going to do it, at the same time, you know, you're not as good as a Pittsburgh that's coming in 2017 and beating you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and that's the overall issue, is that you don't, like, we've had these glimpses of success, and like we've had times where fans are like, oh, we need to build on it, we need to do something with this, and we do, and then we kind of come back to earth, and we're like, well, okay, we weren't as good as we thought. Like, my big thing is that if we didn't hire, like, our problem started when we hired Corey Cluson as coach in like 2009, and that he destroyed the relationship with Danny Heatley, and then it kind of trickled down, and it seemed like he just ruined the relationship with Spezza and Alfredsson, and this is like the one thing I feel like Brian Murray might have regretted, was keeping him on at the end of the season instead of letting him go after the 09 season when he was brought in halfway. Like, and you know, we've been kind of like being a middle of a pack team since then. We haven't been at that like top echelon team that we were in like 07, but we haven't been. We're like, this is the worst we've been since the beginning of our exception into the league.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you said it best, but you know, back then with that core of Heatley, Alfredsson, Spezza, that, you know, that was a core that you could retool and build around and actually have a chance to win a championship year after year. That was the team that, if anyone was going to do it in this history of the Ottawa Senators, in the modern history, it was definitely that core. It wasn't the Carlson Stone era. They were just, you know, like you said, just catching lightning in a bottle, and the odd time having crazy runs that came seemingly out of nowhere. But if we're being honest with ourselves, they were not nearly to the level that the Heatley, Alfredsson, Spezza era was.
No, and I think you really you can really tell who in the Sens community started watching hockey in like 2012 versus the ones that have been watching hockey since the early 2000s or earlier. Because I've had plenty of conversations with people in the Sens community who don't remember the Heatley, Spezza, like they don't remember the pizza line. They don't remember the Volchenkov, Phillips. Like, people remember like the back end of Phillips' career, and they're like, and it comes up a lot in terms of Phillips' retirement, like jersey retirement. Phillips, like, outside of, you know, the chair for Redden kind of thing, Phillips was probably one of our most consistent defensemen. Since he arrived in Ottawa, and then you had him paired up with Volchenkov, and that was just a nasty combo. You had him with Redden, and it was something we've never seen before. And it was just, you can really tell who started watching near the end of Alfredsson and Phillips' kind of career in Ottawa versus the ones who've been here through the start.
Yeah, and total different era of hockey. Like a player like Chris Phillips was actually insanely valuable back then. Like he was a rock back there. He was rock solid. His teammates clearly loved him, and he did so much more. It wasn't about points back then, and now I think people get hung up on points. I mean, especially for defensemen, when you're sacrificing defense for these offensive numbers. It's not really that good. Look at Rasmus Ristolainen in Buffalo, like just a bit of a disaster, but he'll still put up like 40 or 50 points every year.
Yeah, and I mean, I said it before. Like, I would never if you give me a list of like 15 defensemen, I would not be surprised if Carlson wasn't on that list. Carlson, Burns, Doughty, like those guys, none of them are, in my opinion, worthy of a top 15 nomination. The only one that might be worthy is Duncan Keith. 2 Norris trophies, 3 Stanley Cups, one of the best just pure two-way defensemen. And I think people forget that, like, I've had this conversation about Chabot. Chabot's not that great defensively. His numbers aren't that great, but he's great enough offensively to mask those problems. If you go back to the Vegas game in Ottawa, he hands Stevenson a goal. He literally passes it to him on the power play, and he just goes down the ice and scores. And like there is times consistently all year he's done things like that. And I don't know when this happened. I don't know when this switched to solid two-way guys like Niedermeyer, Lindstrom, Pronger, to this offensive-minded, the best defense is a great offense kind of thing. And it's like, and I think this is the thing we're going to have with Makar and Hughes, and it's going to be the thing for the next little while, which is why the Sanderson pick is so head-scratching for a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm glad you tied Sanderson into that, because that's where I was going next with it. Yeah, Jake Sanderson is going to help remind people, or if people weren't around for the era, it will definitely shed some light on the fact that defense is important, and you have to play defense to win championships. I love Thomas Chabot. I love what he brings. And exactly what you said, his offense is so good that it can mask a lot of his defensive troubles. But again, if we're being honest with ourselves, Thomas Chabot is not good defensively. Erik Karlsson, certainly during the first few seasons of his career, was bad defensively. And just blatantly got beat, but he was so good offensively that it definitely masked the problems. So I agree from that perspective, for sure. You have to have a nice balance on your blue line. You have to have some defensive guys that can help balance things out.
There's a reason why a guy like Karlsson needed a guy like Mathot to have success.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of these offensive guys, you don't see them paired. Like a lot of people wanted Jamie Drysdale. Everyone was going, just head over heels for Jamie Drysdale and wanting to add him at the draft to the team. And I kept arguing with people on Twitter about the prospect of adding Jamie Drysdale and playing him with Chabot. People were so stuck on this dynamo pairing of Drysdale and Chabot. And I was thinking the whole time, and Drysdale's not bad defensively. Like he's probably better defensively. His ceiling might be better defensively than Chabot, but not substantially. We're not talking about Jake Sanderson defensively. So adding Drysdale to Chabot would just be a complete disaster in their own end. Like this would not be a very good pairing aside from the power play. And that's where I said, like, okay, if you want more offensive production on the power play, that seems feasible. But if you're talking about playing these guys as a pairing, it just seems ridiculous to me.
See, my thing, because I'll go on record and say that I wanted, as much as I like Sanderson, if you go back to my episodes in like December, I talk about wanting Sanderson. I don't think but it wasn't at like 5. I think, personally, I'll go on record and say I wanted Drysdale at 5. If we're going to pick a defenseman, and that's not because I wanted to pair him with Chabot. I just thought that if you look at our right side, it's not very strong in terms of offensive ability. If you look at Bernard Docker and Thompson, not much offensive ability on the right side. So it would kind of put in a haymaker of a player like Drysdale on the right side. You would probably pair him with a guy like Wolanin, but that would mean he's either a second or third pairing, which is fine because realistically, Sanderson's most likely our second pairing left D, and he's probably going to get played with Shabbat or with Brandstrom being moved over to the right eventually. But I will come out and say on record that I did want Drysdale because I thought he fit a need that we didn't have on the right side. I have no issue with the Sanderson pick, and I think he'll be a great addition to the team whenever he comes up here from North Dakota.
Yeah, you weren't the only one for sure. A lot of people wanted Drysdale over Sanderson, especially if you're picking as high as pick 5, because a lot of people seen Jamie Drysdale's offensive ceiling as much higher than Jake Sanderson, and that's fair. When I made my initial kind of analysis of the two, I thought the exact same. Like I thought Sanderson's offensive ceiling was not going to be even close to a top 5 pick or even a top 10 pick. Initially, I had him outside of the top 10. And the more I watched Jake Sanderson, the more I liked his game and thought, you know what, he's so good in transition that he's going to get some secondary assists just from moving the puck from outside, just outside the blue line to the first guy. And they're going to score in transition so much just from that play because he's so good at it. So I don't think his offensive ceiling is much lower than Jamie Drysdale's.
See, from what I've watched, Sanderson isn't much to roam around in the offensive zone, though. That's the thing. Is that if you watch, like Drysdale can get lost in the shuffle. He'll skate around the ice. He'll kind of go from point to point and kind of get lost in there. You don't see that much from Sanderson. I think Sanderson, though, is going to kind of – he reminds me a lot of Duncan Keith, and it's very much a guy who can give you points, and he'll get points. I don't think there's no way you can argue he won't get points. But what he's going to do is he's going to stop the other team from getting points. He's going to get more points than he's giving up. I think he's going to be – if you're an analytical guy, I think he's going to be one of those guys that analytics – rave about when he gets to the NHL.
Yeah, he's definitely going to be an analytics darling. There's no question about that. I agree with what you said. In the offensive zone specifically, that's where he has to work the most. Like, he just doesn't have the same level of creativity as someone like Drysdale, and he's not really thinking offense. He's more thinking transition defense at that point and kind of stationary on the blue line. I think he has a pretty decent shot. Like he could have a good one-timer, but he doesn't really open himself up for a shot very well. He's only really at this stage, he's only really dangerous in transition and on the breakout from an offensive perspective. But again, when you're not sacrificing defense for offense, it's a different animal. And we're talking about a more complete player.
But here's like, let's say we pair him up with Brandstrom. Do you really need him to focus on being that like offensive guy? Do you really need him to focus him about wandering around the offensive zone? You can stick him on the blue line and just kind of flow with Brandstrom, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah, and I think your cat agrees.
Yeah, I don't know. He is super noisy for no reason right now. He was asleep like 5 minutes ago. Always the worst time. Every time I go to record, he's just like, I want attention.
Yeah, mine sometimes will just come up and like lay on my computer. So I'm glad he's not doing that right now.
Oh, he's definitely done it. He's literally just laid right across my computer as I'm recording. And I'm like, Cat, what are you doing?
Yeah. But yeah, exactly what you said. Sanderson and Brandstrom would be like a very dynamic pairing. You've got a little bit of everything there. And it allows Brandstrom to have that freedom in the offensive zone. You know, when you have a sturdy, steady figure like Sanderson back there, and I know we're talking about the future, like this is something that, you know, we're not telling you guys that Sanderson and Brandstrom are going to be next year's second line pairing. I think there's potential for that, but it's probably pretty low. But in a couple of years, this is going to be a very versatile decor, no doubt.
Very. We're almost up to the hour mark, so we're gonna move on to our Sun's Hour over under projections for the 2021 season. And this one was something I was thinking about for the last couple of days, and it's not player related, it's team related. And it's how many power play goals do you think Ottawa is going to score? I have it at 32 and a half power play goals. I think that's relatively low, but this is for a 48 game season. So that's
Okay.
sitting at like 80% about.
So about 80% on the power play. When we look at the power play, this has potential to be one of their biggest improvements in my mind from last year. You're looking at Dadonov, who is a very good power play player. He brings a lot in terms of playing in that bumper position and just being able to have that quick release and being able to get the shot off really quickly. So I think that's a huge improvement. Brady Tkachuk is going to score more because he's going to convert on those high danger chances. He leads the league in high danger chances, and that's a spot that he just simply didn't convert as many as he probably should have, and the shooting percentage was lower as a result. So I could see him finishing more. Shabbat is great at working the power play, and if Tim Stützle graduates to the NHL, that's his bread and butter. Like the power play, even right away, I could see him being a dynamic impact player. And then we will have a better secondary unit too. If Drake Batherson is a player that could break out, he's a guy that could add to your power play. If we're talking about Colin White, who's a player that needs to bounce back, he's not the most dynamic, but on a secondary unit, he could play in a similar position to Brady Tkachuk. And I know this is a long-winded answer to an over-under, but I'm taking the over because I think Ottawa is going to be really, really improved on the power play next year.
Oh yeah, I'm going to agree on that. I think 32 and a half power play goals. You should easily take the over on that in a 48 game season. In an 82, you're probably going to look at more like 60 goals. But I agree with everything you said. I think it's going to be a vastly improved team. Adding Dadonov, Galchenyuk, hopefully with a healthy Colin White. You're going to also have guys like Anisimov and Tierney, Connor Brown, who are going to get minutes. You're going to have Balsers on there as well. They're most likely going to see Nick Paul. I would feel confident with anyone on their roster group being part of the power play.
Yeah, and I think shout out to Christian Wolanin too. I think we missed him coming off the injury, but he's another power play force potentially for Ottawa.
100%. He's probably going to man the second power play. And it's going to be interesting to see how they utilize it. But, I think, like you said, Tkachuk's going to be a better finisher. Hopefully with Dadonov, whoever, my big concern, though, is whoever's manning that first power play unit. That's going to be the big thing. I wonder who's going to be manning that first power play unit. I would expect it to be whoever's manning the first line, to be honest.
Yep.
But it's going to be interesting. I think a first unit of Dadonov, Tkachuk, Shabbat. I'm going to say Galchenyuk and possibly Connor Brown or Drake Batherson as that second defenseman.
Yeah, that's almost identical to what I would have on my first unit.
Like it's going to be one of those things where like there's going to be a lot of like, especially during camp, we're going to have like, there's going to be every day. It's going to be a new thing. Haley's going to mention it or Bruce is going to mention it. It's going to be like, oh, and today's power play work is going to have like the first unit. It's going to be friggin' like Formanton, Norris, Sokurov, Brandstrom, and Logan Brown on the first unit. And people are going to lose their mind.
Yeah, that will be insane in Belleville as well. So,
oh man, I can't wait. I'm so excited for Belleville hockey.
Oh, same here. I really hope, and like we talked about before, they rely on that gate revenue. So, hopefully it'll open up and we can go watch some hockey games.
Have you been to CAA Arena?
Oh yeah. I took in quite a few games last year. So
Oh, nice. Yeah,
yeah,
I went to like 2 of them, and they were fantastic.
yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think both games I went to, they won in a shootout, so that was cool.
Yeah, I the one game was against Milwaukee, and we lost, but that was the one game where like we had Paul Formanton or Brown, Formanton, and Batherson and Lajoie and Yaros. They were the only like 5 regulars, and it was all like AHL or ECHL players, and we still held our ground. And I'm like, oh my god, like this team healthy would be crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. My most memorable Belleville game was Eric Brandstrom's first game there.
Oh, yeah, that's sick.
I was able to go for that.
I
And
got
I
a
was like,
signed team stick for like $50. I went during the summer showcase, and they were doing the auction stuff. So I'm like, I'm gonna put it. It was starting was $50. I'm like, fuck, screw it, I'll do it. I'll start it at $50. I thought someone would have bet $100 or so, because I think the increment was only 25, so $75. I thought someone was gonna do it. Went back at the end of the second period, the start of the third, and lo and behold, no one bid on it. And I'm like, sick. So I got a team signed Belleville stick for $50.
jeez, did you have any luck out there?
I know, it was crazy. And I ran into Pierre Dorian and Mad Sogard.
Wow, that's a memorable experience.
Yeah, it was great. It was fantastic. I think we were. It was when they played the Jets in the rookie showcase series that they had with, I think, Montreal and Toronto or something like that.
Right.
But yeah, no, great experience.
Yeah, I like I know it's a small arena and stuff, but I like it. Like there's no bad seat, you're there unless you're too close. I think if you get too close, you're obstructed a little bit, but as long as you're a little bit higher up, there's no bad seat. And it's like just such a great fan experience in Belleville.
I sat beside the tunnel on one of the games.
Yeah.
Like it was freaking amazing.
Like, and even if you're not beside the tunnel and you're like a few rows up, everything is right there. Like you're just super close there. So it's a nice spot to check out a game, and a lot of our stars are going to be there. So that's going to be a busy place if they do open the gates up.
Yeah, I hope so, because I want to head out and grab a game. But that wraps up this episode of the Sensauer podcast. We got Derek Lee. You can follow him at dlee075 on Twitter. Myself at Shane_Ryan97, as well as the podcast Sens_Hour on Twitter and Instagram. Remember, we do have the jersey contest, so definitely retweet it. I think we're in the top 5 for retweets across the network. Let us get number 1. San Jose, our San Jose affiliate, the Stick Hungry podcast, currently I believe sits number 1. So we got to beat San Jose. So definitely go out there, retweet it, follow us, follow the Hockey Podcast Network. Great network, all 31 teams and much more available. Thank you, Derek, for coming on. We'll be back here with a brand new episode for you guys on Monday. We'll be going live, most likely Saturday or Sunday, on Twitter and on YouTube. Stay safe out there. Have a great one. Again, Derek, thank you for coming on.
Thanks again, Shane.